Well, today is a big day in the life of our church as we collectively take a step of faith. Now, it's not the first time that we've taken a step of faith as a congregation. There have been some other big moments in our history as a church. In 2013, as a smaller group of us gathered in Central Auditorium at Grace Church and launched what was then a campus and became Grace Fishers. About a year later, in 2014, as we became nomads and we moved into Fall Creek Junior High down the street, and we did portable church for about 2.5 years. And I look around and see some faces of you who showed up at 6 o'clock in the morning, and it was early, but there was a lot of joy in that place as we were committed to doing church together. And then in 2016, in December, just before Christmas, when we moved into this building and it became our permanent home in this community. And then our biggest step yet was 2.5 years ago in August of 2021 as we launched as an independent congregation. And then we have today as we prepare for the future of Grace Fishers, as we make our commitments for the Reach Initiative, and we're going to do that later in the service. I also want to just acknowledge any guests or visitors that are here. There's going to be an element of this that's going to be kind of family, but I think most of the service will encourage you and will speak to your hearts. And one of the things that has been absolutely true each time we've taken a step of faith and trusted God is He's shown up. He's encouraged us. He's strengthened us. He's provided what we need. And there have been many small miracles along the way. And the cool thing about miracles is that God is the one that gets the credit, and we just get to participate. And that's ultimately what He wants for us. He wants us to trust Him. He wants us to participate with Him. And He wants us to be a part of the miracle. And there's a story in the New Testament that I think captures this idea beautifully. And it's a story that's been important to me for a long time. And it's a story that's commonly referred to as the feeding of the 5,000. It's one of my favorite stories about Jesus. And apparently it was a favorite of the gospel writers too, because it was one of the only miracles that's recorded in all 4 gospel accounts. So I know it's important. Like I said, it's important to me, and I believe it'll have something important to say to you as well. And we're going to jump into this story in just a minute, and you don't need to grab a Bible, but I do want to give you a little bit of context. We're going to do something a little different today. There were 2 events that happened right before this story began, and one of them was something of great joy, and something else that happened that was difficult and hard. And that's the way life often works, is that we have joy and sorrow mixed together. But the moment of joy and excitement was captured in Mark chapter 6, and the apostles returned to Jesus from their ministry tour and told them about all that they had done and taught. And then Jesus said, let's go off by ourselves to a quiet place and rest a while. He said this because there were so many people coming and going that Jesus and His apostles, those 12, didn't even have time to eat. And so Jesus wants to take them away to kind of rest and also to celebrate. I know they were excited from all that they'd seen or experienced, but there was also an event of great sorrow, and that was the beheading of John the Baptist. And John the Baptist was connected with the beginning of Jesus' own ministry, but even more than that, they were cousins and they were friends. And so I'm sure this weighed on Jesus' heart, and it probably weighed on a number of the other disciples as well. Now, the way we're going to hear this story today is similar to what we did a few weeks ago, and I want you to listen with your imagination. I want you to see the story. I want you to feel the story. I want you to do that as much as I want you to hear the words. And so if it helps, I'm going to encourage you to close your eyes, kind of get comfortable and settle in, and I want you to see yourself in the story as one of Jesus' disciples. So early that morning, Jesus calls you and the other 11 disciples and directs you to get into the boat. Peter asked, "Where are we headed?" And Jesus answered, "There's a quiet place near the town of Bethsaida. It's remote so that we can be alone and rest." You've been in a boat in these waters so many times before you immediately feel at home. Even the smell of an old fishing boat doesn't bother you. You grew up fishing on these waters with your brothers and your father. The Sea of Galilee is temperamental. You've seen it in all conditions, beautiful and serene at moments, wild and terrifying at others. So it's good to be on the water in such a calm day with a light breeze coming across the water. The early morning sun warms your face, and as you sit in the boat, you realize your own weariness. The rhythmic lapping of the waves almost puts you to sleep. But while your body is at rest, your mind is active, thinking of recent days. Jesus sent you to teach and to heal and to represent him. You and Andrew, one of the other disciples, were sent out together, and people responded as you and Andrew shared Jesus' words about life in this kingdom. You saw joy on faces as people experienced hope for their souls and healing for their bodies and their hearts. A stronger gust of wind stirs you. You notice Jesus is quieter than normal, so you turn to see him resting in the back of the boat. As you watch him and you see his face, he looks tired as well, and you wonder if it's weariness from many days of teaching and serving and healing, but then you remember it's probably grief, having heard the news about the death of John the Baptist, his cousin and his friend. Your mind and attention shift forward suddenly as you hear a noise and realize that you've almost arrived. The sound that you hear is coming from the shore, and it appears to be a crowd. Some of the people must have seen you leaving and guessed where you'd be going. They've run ahead because they want to see Jesus again. And as the boat arrives at the shore, Peter is the first off, and he steps off into the ankle-deep water. You follow and steady the boat. And as you glance over your shoulder at the crowd, you see people coming near as they recognize Jesus. The crowd is beginning to swell. It's probably into the thousands. You look at Jesus as he steps off the boat, and you notice a change in his face. You see the heaviness melt into compassion. He knows that there are many people who need healing and words of hope. They're like sheep without a shepherd. And so, as he often does, Jesus welcomes them and begins to teach them about the kingdom of God, teaching them about prayer and forgiveness, about how to love your neighbor and what it truly looks like to honor God. And at a point, Jesus pauses in his teaching. He recognizes a man steadying himself with a crutch, and Jesus walks over to the man. He asks him a question. He prays for him, and then he heals him. And then the floodgates open. People in the crowd who need healing push forward. And as they swarm around Jesus, one by one, he touches them and he heals them. You see heartache replaced with joy and broken bodies healed. Joy fills your heart as you witness this, and it goes on and on all day. But late in the afternoon, you hear Andrew whispering to his brother, and together he and Peter go to Jesus. You and the other disciples follow closely so you can be a part of the conversation. Peter asks Jesus, this is a remote place and it's already getting late. Send the crowds away so that they can go to nearby farms and villages to buy something to eat and find a place to sleep. There's nothing here. Jesus quietly replies, that isn't necessary. You feed them. And then turning to you, Jesus adds, where can we buy bread to feed all of these people? You ponder his question for a moment, and then you respond with what? We always seem to have just what we need, but with a crowd this size, even if we worked for months, we wouldn't have enough money to feed them. And Jesus glances around at the 12, and he asks another question. How much bread do you have? No one seems to know the answer, so Jesus says, go find out. James and John check the small pack of supplies, and what little bread there is now gone. As you and the other disciples discuss what to tell Jesus, a small boy is tugging on Andrew's cloak. He overheard the conversation, and he simply offers what he has to Andrew. Andrew takes the small bag from the boy, and it contains 5 small barley loaves and 2 small fish. But you wonder, what good is this with this huge crowd? You return to Jesus and tell him, we have only 5 loaves of bread and 2 small fish. Bring them here, Jesus says. Tell the people to sit down in groups of about 50 each. And as the disciples and you direct them, the people begin to sit, not fully aware of what's about to happen, but many unusual and extraordinary things happen around Jesus, so they follow your direction. You begin to realize that the crowd is even bigger than you thought. There are at least 5,000 men, and with women and children, there's probably 10 to 15,000 people. And now Jesus takes the 5 loaves and the 2 fish, and he looks up to heaven, and he blesses them. And breaking the loaves into pieces, he begins handing the bread to you and the other disciples so that you can give it to the people. And then he does the same thing with the fish. You take an armload of bread and you distribute it. And then you take a load of fish and you do the same. And each time you return to Jesus, you wonder how 5 simple barley loaves and 2 small fish are feeding so many. But you're so busy, you don't even have time to think. You and the rest of the disciples do this over and over. This is a large crowd, so it takes a long time. It goes on until everyone has eaten as much as they wanted. And after everyone has been fed, Jesus tells you and the other disciples, now gather the leftovers so nothing is wasted. So you work through the crowd, helping collect the pieces of fish and uneaten bread. And as you return, Jesus sees you, and he hands you a small basket filled with bread and fish. You see, there was just enough left over to feed the 12 apostles. There's a basket for each of you. And you've been so busy that you've been forgotten your own hunger, and you realize you haven't had anything to eat since breakfast. Jesus directs you and the disciples to get back into the boat, and he tells Peter to take the boat to Bethsaida, that he will meet you there. Jesus returns to dismiss the crowd. He goes up into the quiet of the mountainside to pray. You sit in silence in the boat. You're tired from a long day, but you're thankful. Thankful that you got to participate in this miracle, and also wondering what would have happened if that small boy hadn't offered what he had, the 5 loaves and the 2 fish. You can go ahead and open your eyes now. I'd love to sit down and have a conversation about what you experienced as you were hearing this story, because this is one of my favorite stories in the Scripture. It's a story that I go back to often, because over and over in my life, I find myself with a challenge that's way beyond my capacity to happen, or my capacity to handle. It's happened in my relationships. It's happened at times in our finances, in my job, in my ministry life. A few of those moments for me, a number of years ago, just out of college, I was a software developer, and I was trying to figure out what did it look like to represent Jesus in the marketplace. And I remember connecting with that story in this season for the first time. It's also the year that I went to Russia several years later, and I was with a team, and we got dropped off about a half an hour outside of St. Petersburg, Russia. We were going to live there for a year. We had about 3 weeks of training, and so honestly, we were in way over our heads, and we knew that we needed God to show up in that moment. And then there's personal seasons as a young husband, as a young dad, and there were many times that I still think this, what am I doing? I need God to show up in my life. It happened too as I left the marketplace to work in ministry at the age of 32, and then there have been various seasons of ministry that I've been called to lead in. And I don't know what challenge you're facing in your life in this season, but I believe this story has application for all of us. Because you see, when we're represented with a challenge, there's a couple of responses that are easy for us to come up with. When we're overwhelmed by the size of the need or the challenge, and we feel like it's too big for us to handle, we simply think that's impossible. I could never overcome that. I think the thing that I also often think is when I'm faced with a challenge is what I have and who I am is never going to be enough to face this. And then sometimes I think if I address the challenge, am I going to have enough left over to take care of everything else and the other needs in my life? And then if I'm facing the challenge alongside of other people, sometimes I get distracted and I look at the person next to me and I wonder, what are they doing? And that's why I love this story, because Jesus answers all these questions and the associated fears that we encounter. For instance, if we know it's impossible and it's scary to need a miracle, but it means that there's room for God to show up in our lives. You see, sometimes God shows up in ways that are unexpected, but when He does that, He can provide for us. And sometimes the miracle that happens in our lives doesn't look like what we expect it to do or even what we want it to be. Sometimes He just shows up with the miracle of His presence on our lives, and for us, that's enough. And that may be the miracle. I also think about when I'm faced with a challenge and I think what I have or who I am isn't going to be enough to go through this challenge. And the truth is, it won't be enough unless we bring it to Jesus. And Jesus never asks us to do the impossible or to be enough. He simply says, trust me. And then He adds, what you have and who you are is enough if you trust me with it, because I can multiply it. He never asks us to bring what we don't have. He asks us to trust in what we do have, even if it seems insignificant in our own eyes. And then there's the fear that what if I share what I have? What if I invest my life in this person? Or maybe if I share what I have financially, will I have enough? Will there be enough left for me? And it's that scarcity mindset that we talked about a couple of weeks ago. And the truth is that Jesus cares about our physical needs. He cares about our spiritual, our emotional, and our relational needs. And I love in this story how His care is practically demonstrated for His disciples, is after they spent the day caring and investing and pouring themselves out on behalf of others, He simply has enough left over that He hands it to them and takes care of their needs as well. And I've often wondered how many people in that crowd had loaves or fishes or some other sort of food, but they were afraid and they withheld it because they were afraid that they wouldn't have enough. But the truth is, friends, is that Jesus is always enough. We remember ultimately that He is the bread of life and He can meet our needs even in the most difficult of circumstances. And then there's this last question when we get distracted by what the person next to us is doing. And it's easy to miss out on being part of the miracle because we're worried about what are they doing or, what are they bringing to this? And I think it's easy for us, whether we're leading or serving or giving, to get distracted or just wonder what the person next to us is doing. But the truth is that Jesus blesses each one of us differently. And He calls us to give and to serve in proportion to how He's blessed us. And He may even call us all to sacrifice differently. But one of the big pitfalls of comparison is sometimes when we look at what the person brings to the left or the right of us, and what we have in our hands seems small and insignificant, and we think, why bother? But what Jesus is asking us to do may be different than the person next to us, but it's no less significant what we bring. In fact, one of my favorite parts of the story, and only one of the gospel writers mention it, is that a small child was the one who brought the 5 loaves and the fishes. Because a child is often simple, and he wasn't worried about any of those things. He simply saw a need, and he brought what he had, and he gave it to Jesus. And so there's an individual lesson in this for each one of us. And I'm not sure what you need to hear today. I'm not sure what your challenge or what Jesus is asking you to trust him with, or what step he's asking you to take. But I think there's individual lessons for us. But there's also a corporate lesson. And he's been doing this in the church throughout the ages. You see, Jesus didn't pick a bunch of highly qualified and capable people. He picked a bunch of normal, broken people, and he made them enough. He took what they had, the little that they had and were, and he multiplied it. And he's continued that throughout the history of the church. And he's continued that here at Grace Fishers. And when I think about our leadership team and our staff, we all would probably describe ourselves as unlikely leaders, but we've been called to lead in the season, and we simply bring what we have, we offer it to Jesus, and over again, it's proven to be enough. And I think that that's true of this congregation as well, as we simply bring what we have, and we give it to Jesus, and we trust him with it, and he multiplies it. And our story of trust and God multiplying and blessing it is continuing into this season as we've launched into this Reach initiative. And if you remember, this initiative has two parts to it. The first part is connected with why we launched Grace Fishers here in this community in the first place. It was about a community that God was bringing together that had the focus of reaching our broader community. We wanted our friends and our neighbors to experience the hope of Jesus. And so the way that we've qualified that or described this to make it really simple for each one of us to get a hold of is we've simply been asking the question, who's that one person in your life that God is asking you to pray for, invest in, and bring the hope of Jesus when the opportunity arises? And that's the first commitment that we're asked to make together as a congregation. And then the second part is to prepare for the future, and it's preparing by raising an additional $2 million to reduce our mortgage principal. And this is the second commitment, but it's less about paying down the mortgage. Yes, that's important, but it's also about preparing this church for the future and as we continue to pass the baton to the next generation. And I think it's easy for us as we think about the challenge to make those commitments, either taking a step into somebody's life that needs the hope of Jesus or to grow in generosity and to sacrifice. I think it's easy, just like in that story, to have those same responses to the challenge. It's easy to think it's impossible. This person that needs the hope of Jesus, they've been far from him for a long time, and I think it's an impossible challenge. I'm not sure that me moving into their life can make an impact. Or I think it's easy to think what I have isn't going to be enough to make a difference, or be concerned about, is there going to be enough left for me? Or again, it's easy to get distracted and worry and wonder about what the person next to us is doing. But here's my invitation, and I hope this is the invitation that you hear from God, whether it's in the Reach Initiative or some other part of your life. He wants you to be a part of the miracle. But we never know how God is going to use the simple things that we bring to him when we give it to him. But I promise you, he will multiply if you bring it to him. Now, last night, the leaders of Grace Fishers gathered out in the auditorium to do two things. We were remembering God's faithfulness, which is an important practice to do. We remembered his faithfulness through this whole journey. And then the second thing we did is we brought our commitments, because leaders go first. And so one of the things that I'm encouraged to tell you is 100% of your leaders are in. So the governing board and spouses, your staff and spouses, and then the Reach team, which is a mix of staff and volunteers that have helped lead this initiative, are all in on the Reach initiative. And there's one more thing that I want to share, and I shared a song with them, and this song captures what I believe that God is doing with us in this season, and it's a song titled Evermore, and it's by Crosspoint Music. And the chorus says this: Lord, take us deeper. Lord, take us farther. Give us the faith to step out on the water. Help us to believe even more of you. And I think there's this collective sense that as we're trusting God, even in the midst of coming to this point today, God has been showing up, and we're entering into a new season as a church. And that's exciting, friends. And so today is the day that we begin to make our commitments, our reach commitments. And I just want to acknowledge there are those of you who are guests or visitors, so during this part you can sit back. You're also welcome to participate. Also, in just a few moments, the kids from our kids ministry and our student ministries are going to be coming in here and joining us as well. They'll be sitting over there. And they're going to be turning in their relational commitments for the one because they've been having conversations with them as well. And so they're going to be turning in their commitments. You should have a commitment card on your seat or in the seat back in front of you. I want to encourage you to grab that now. If you need one, just simply raise your hand. One of the ushers will bring it to you if you can't find a commitment card if you didn't bring it. And Max, one of our ushers, keep that hand up, and the ushers will be around, and they'll have those cards. And if you're online, there's also a digital commitment card, and that's going to just about be up for a moment, but it'll be back up in a couple of minutes. And a couple of quick reminders. As you fill out the commitment card, you just need to do one per family. And then for the relational commitment, there's a spot for you either to write the initials or the first name of your one, and just write those ones. If you're filling it out for a family, just write multiple names. And if you don't know who that one is, you can do one of two things. You can simply write a question mark or write the word praying on there that says, I'm taking a step and I'm praying about who that person is in my life. And then in the financial commitment, this is over and above giving. And remember, 100% of what you designate for the REACH initiative is going to go to reducing our mortgage principal. Now, a couple of things are going to begin to happen. Jess is going to play some instrumental music and just give you some space to finish filling out your commitment card if you didn't come with it filled out. And then Josh and the band will come back up in a couple of moments, and there's two things that you're going to need to do. First is there's tables stationed around the room where you can grab a light bulb and use one of the pen. And what we want you to do with that is either write the first name of your one or simply write the initials on there as well. And then bring your card and your light bulb, and we're going to go counterclockwise. So for those of you who get confused about clockwise and counterclockwise, head towards the cross. And then you're going to walk across the stage, and there's two baskets. There's one for a commitment card and one for the light bulb. And we're going to use those in a couple of weeks. We'll tell you what, you'll get to see those in a couple of weeks. And then after you've dropped off your commitment card and your light bulb, you can just enjoy and engage in worship. So again, just take some time, and then Josh will kick off our time of bringing our commitment cards together.
Well, over the next 15 minutes or so, we're going to engage in this time of worship. There's going to be a lot of movement in the room, several different things going on, which I think is just beautiful as we worship in a number of ways, through song, through giving our commitments, thinking through our ones, and leaving our light bulbs here in the basket as well. And so we just encourage you, maybe you're still contemplating, maybe you're still praying or discussing, continue to do that. Feel free to do that in this time. And then when you're ready, feel free to make your way across the stage, starting over there by the cross and dropping off your commitments and your light bulbs. But we just want to give God all the glory in this moment because he is truly worthy of it all. I searched the world, but it couldn't fill me. And man's empty praise and treasures that fade are never enough. And you came along and put me back together. And every desire is now satisfied here in your love. Oh, there's nothing better than you. There's nothing better than you, Lord. There's nothing, but nothing is better than you. Not afraid to show you my weakness, my failures and flaws. Lord, you've seen them all, and you still call me friend. 'Cause the God of the mountain is the God of the valley. There's not just continue in this space, again, recognizing, God, may your will be done on earth as it is in heaven. And I even go back to how we began this service in Psalm 119. God, your faithfulness extends to every generation. Every generation. For you are the same yesterday, today, and forever. We stand upon the firm foundation, which is Jesus Christ, who is always faithful, who always provides. So we want to finish our time just declaring his faithfulness, declaring that firm foundation of who he is.
Oh, your mercy never fails me. All my days I've been held in your hands. From the moment that I wake up until I lay my head, I will sing of the goodness of God. Let's sing. All my life you have been faithful. All my life you have been so good. With every breath that I am able, oh, I will sing of the goodness of God. I love your voice. You have led me through the fire on darkest nights. You are close like no other. I've known you as a father. I've known you as a friend. And I have lived in the goodness of God. Oh yeah. All my life you have been faithful. Every day. All my life you have been so good. With every breath that I am able, oh, I will sing of the goodness of God. Yes, your goodness is running after, it's running after me. Your goodness is running after, it's running after me. With my life laid down, I'm surrendered now. I give you everything. Your goodness is running after, it's running after me. Come on, sing. Your goodness is running after, it's running after me. Every day of my life, your goodness is running after, it's running after me. With my life laid down, I'm surrendered now. I give you everything. Your goodness is running, it just keeps running after me. All my life you have been faithful. All my life you have been so good. With every breath that I am, oh, I'm gonna sing of the goodness of God. Come on and sing it. Come on and sing it, yes. 'Cause all my life you have been faithful. Oh,
been God, and he has been so faithful. He's been faithful in each step of our journey as a church, and I'm confident he will be faithful in your life as well.